Ella had always believed that life in the United States rewarded only those who ran fast enough to keep up. Living in New York City, she learned early that dreams were expensive, and survival was even more so. At 24, she worked two exhausting jobs. One is a morning cafe server in Brooklyn, and another is a nighttime cleaner at a small office building near Manhattan. Her days were long, her feet constantly aching, but her spirit remained kind. She carried the values her late grandmother had taught her. Help when you can, even if you have nothing to spare. One cold evening after finishing her shift at the cafe, Ella passed through John F. Kennedy International Airport on her way home. The airport was crowded with hurried travelers, dragging suitcases, speaking different languages and staring at their phones. Everyone seemed busy, stressed, and focused on themselves. As Ella walked toward the exit, she noticed an elderly woman standing alone near the seating area. The woman looked lost, her hands trembling as she tried to lift a heavy suitcase. Her eyes searched the crowd full of confusion and quiet fear. Several people walked past without stopping. Some glanced at her briefly, then looked away. Ella slowed her steps. She hesitated for only a moment, remembering how little time she had and how tired she felt. Still, something in her heart wouldn't let her ignore the situation. She approached the woman gently and asked if she needed help. The elderly woman looked relieved, almost surprised, and nodded. Ella picked up the suitcase and guided her to a nearby bench. She listened patiently as the woman explained that she was traveling alone and had trouble understanding the boarding instructions. Ella checked her boarding pass, helped her find the correct gate, and even bought her a bottle of water and a sandwich. With the little cash she had left, they talked while waiting. The woman spoke about her son, who lived a busy life and rarely had time to travel with her. Ella smiled and listened, never once mentioning her own struggles. When it was time to board, Ella stayed until the last moment, making sure the woman was comfortable and safely assisted by the airline staff. The elderly woman held Ella's hands tightly, her eyes filled with gratitude. She thanked her again and again, calling her an angel. Ella felt embarrassed and laughed softly, telling her it was nothing. She waved goodbye and walked away, never expecting to see her again. As Ella left the airport, she had no idea that her simple act of kindness had been noticed. She didn't know that unseen eyes had watched every moment. For Ella, it was just another day in a hard life. But in truth, this moment at the airport was the beginning of a story that would change her future in ways she could never imagine. 2 days after that quiet night at JFK Airport, the city continued its usual rhythm. Unaware that small lives were slowly intersecting, Ella woke up before sunrise in her tiny apartment, preparing for a flight to Los Angeles. She had been called for an interview with a mid-sized design firm, an opportunity she had worked years to earn. Nervous but hopeful, she packed carefully, choosing a simple outfit that made her feel confident, without pretending to be someone she wasn't. At the airport, Ella arrived early, as she always did. She found a seat near her gate and reviewed her notes, repeating answers in her mind. Around her, travelers moved with purpose, business-class passengers chatting on phones, and families juggling children and bags. Ella blended quietly into the crowd unnoticed, just another passenger waiting for a boarding announcement. What she didn't know was that someone else was watching her, this time intentionally. Daniel Herrera sat across the terminal in the private lounge, reviewing security footage from 2 nights earlier. He had asked to see it after his mother returned home, speaking endlessly about a young woman who had helped her. When no one else would, Daniel, a successful businessman and heir to a multi-million-dollar hospitality empire, was used to hearing praise and complaints. But the emotion in his mother's voice was different. Curious, he requested the footage from airport security, expecting nothing more than a quick look. Instead, he saw something rare. On the screen was Ella, tired yet gentle, lifting the suitcase, offering water, listening with sincere attention. She wasn't performing for praise or recognition. She didn't know who his mother was. Her kindness was natural, unforced. Daniel watched the video more than once, surprised by how deeply it affected him. In a world where people often acted out of interest, this felt real now, by coincidence or fate. Daniel spotted the same woman sitting near gate 32. He recognized her immediately. She looked exactly the same as in the video, only now focused and slightly anxious, tapping her fingers against her notebook. Something about her calm presence drew him in. For the first time in years, Daniel felt nervous approaching someone. He asked his assistant to confirm her name and flight. When he heard Ella, the name stayed with him. Daniel stood up, left the comfort of the lounge, and walked into the crowded terminal. Like an ordinary traveler, he reminded himself not to reveal who he was. He didn't want gratitude or admiration based on wealth. He wanted to know her as she truly was. As Daniel walked closer, Ella looked up briefly, meeting his eyes before returning to her notes. She didn't recognize him, and that made Daniel smile in that moment. He decided he wouldn't introduce himself as a millionaire's son, but simply as a man curious about the woman, whose kindness had left a lasting mark on his heart. Daniel approached Ella with a calm smile, careful not to interrupt her thoughts too abruptly. He asked politely if the seat beside her was taken. Ella looked up slightly surprised, then shook her head and moved her notebook aside. There was something respectful and unassuming about him that made her feel at ease. He introduced himself simply as Daniel, without titles or explanations. Ella returned the introduction, unaware of the connection that already bound their lives together. They began with small talk about delayed flights, long airport waits, and the strange comfort of people watching. Slowly the conversation deepened. Daniel asked about her trip, and Ella explained she was flying to Los Angeles for a job interview. She spoke honestly about her struggles in New York, about working long hours, and chasing a dream that often felt out of reach. She didn't complain, but the weight of her life was evident in her words. Daniel listened carefully, impressed by her resilience and humility. Instead of talking about his own success, Daniel asked more questions. He wanted to understand how someone could remain so kind while living such a difficult life. Ella talked about her grandmother, who had raised her and taught her that kindness was the only thing no one could ever take away. As she spoke, Daniel realized he was witnessing something rare, genuine character shaped by hardship, not comfort. When Daniel gently mentioned his mother, Ella smiled with recognition. She remembered the elderly woman instantly and asked if she had reached home safely. Her concern was immediate and sincere. That was the moment Daniel decided to tell her the truth. He explained that the woman she had helped was his mother, and that he had seen what she did at the airport. Ella's face flushed with surprise. She laughed nervously and insisted it had been nothing special. Daniel thanked her not with grand words, but with quiet sincerity. He told her that her kindness had meant more to his family than she could imagine. Ella accepted his thanks gracefully, without changing her tone or attitude. She didn't suddenly treat him with our curiosity after learning he was wealthy. Instead, she asked him about his mother's health and wished him well. As boarding time approached, the announcement echoed through the terminal. Ella gathered her things, preparing to leave. Daniel felt an unexpected sense of urgency. He didn't want this meeting to end as just a coincidence. Before she could step into line, he asked if he could see her again when she returned to New York. There was no pressure in his voice, only honesty. Ella hesitated for a moment, then smiled and agreed. They exchanged numbers, and as she walked toward the gate, Daniel stood still, watching her disappear into the crowd. For the first time in years, his world of wealth and control felt small compared to the simple, powerful connection he had just formed. He knew then that this was not a passing encounter, but the beginning of something meaningful. Weeks passed after their meeting at the airport, yet the connection between Ella and Daniel only grew stronger. They spoke often, sometimes through long phone calls, late at night, sometimes through short messages during busy days. Despite living in two different worlds, their conversations felt natural and easy. Daniel never tried to impress Ella with his wealth, and Ella never asked about it. Instead, they talked about books, childhood memories, fears, and hopes for the future. Slowly, trust replaced curiosity and affection replaced uncertainty. When Ella returned to New York after her interview, Daniel asked her to meet for coffee. She agreed, still unaware of how deeply he had already fallen for her. They met at a small cafe, far from the luxury places Daniel usually visited. Ella felt comfortable there, and that mattered to him. He noticed how she treated the barista with the same kindness she showed everyone else. Watching her laugh over a simple joke, Daniel realized that his feelings were no longer just admiration. They were love a few days later. Daniel invited Ella to dinner at his family home. Nervous but curious, she accepted. That evening she met his mother again. The elderly woman recognized her instantly and embraced her warmly, thanking her once more for the help at the airport. She spoke openly about how that moment restored her faith in people. Ella listened respectfully, touched by her words. There was no awkwardness, only sincerity during dinner. Daniel finally spoke honestly about his life, the pressure of expectations, the loneliness that often came with success, and the emptiness he felt despite having everything. Ella listened the same way she always did, without judgment or fascination. She told him that money could open doors, but kindness kept them open. Her words stayed with him. Later that night, Daniel walked Ella to her car. The city lights reflected softly around them. He stopped, took a deep breath, and confessed his feelings. There were no dramatic promises, no expensive gifts, just honesty. He told her that her kindness had changed him, that he wanted a life built on respect and love, not status. Ella felt overwhelmed but calm. She admitted that she felt the same, that she admired the man he was when he chose to be real. She agreed to give their love a chance, knowing it wouldn't be easy, but believing it would be worth it. Their story became a quiet reminder that love doesn't begin with wealth or power. It begins with compassion, with noticing someone in need and choosing to care. What started as a small act of kindness at an airport became the foundation of a future neither of them had planned, but both were ready to embrace.